Moving on to this 12-mark question. Discuss one likely reason for the rise in BT's profits. Using figure 2, extract B and C, and this is a good question, use a cost revenue diagram to support your answer. So if you've watched the question structure video, you know for 12-mark questions, this is an absolute gem. If it ever tells you to use a cost/revenue diagram, that means at least 8 of your marks are just analysis marks, just you talking about the diagram, you basically using the diagram dynamically, shifting the diagram, whatever it needs to be in this question. And it means it's a lot easier and simpler to pick up these 12 marks. So let's get right on with it. So let's break this down really simply. What is the formula for profits? Profits is, of course, revenue minus costs. So what can we do to boost profits? What are the 2 scenarios where profits will be boosted? Of course, we can either have increased revenue or we can have decreased costs. These are the 2 scenarios where we will see an increase in profits. Now let's have a read of these 2 extracts, B and C, to try and find where examples of where it's shown increases in revenue or decreases in costs. So that would be here, and let's have a look through this. So first line, BT Group reported a rise in profits as revenue increased. So that gives me my first indicator of what I am going to show, what I'm going to shift on this diagram. Since if revenue is increasing, of course, on our cost/revenue diagrams, we have a curve called D equals AR. So demand equals average revenue, which of course is therefore, if revenue is increasing, that means this is going to shift outwards. But now, if our D equals AR is shifting outwards, what curve does this also relate to? There's of course a direct relationship between D equals AR and then your MR curve. Since remember, the relationship is that MR is always twice as steep as your AR curve. That means now we can now conclude that both our D equals AR and our MR curve are both shifting out. And the big thing you need to make sure to remember with these cost revenue diagram questions, you have to make your diagram dynamic. Essentially what that means is shift a curve, shift 2 curves, shift as many curves as possible, as you will be limited to the lower levels. If you just show a monopoly diagram, just a D equals AR, just a normal monopoly diagram, you will be limited to the lowest level of KAY. Since these 12-mark questions, when they say use a cost revenue diagram, you need to be dynamic. But back to the extract, why are they experiencing this rise in revenue? Of course, it's due to the integration, the merger between BT and EE was finalized, meaning that they're controlling more of the market share. If they're controlling more of the market, of course, they are therefore receiving increased demand, and increased demand therefore will cause increased revenue. Or a more step-by-step way you could put it, increased demand means more sales, you times the sales by the price, this will therefore give you increased revenue. And of course, we have had a look through this extract C in previous questions. Essentially what it's talking about is how BT were exploiting consumers with higher landline prices, but the question does also say, have a look at figure 2. So let's see what figure 2 is showing us. So the monthly rental cost of telephone landline, and we have a key here. We have a little wholesale line rental. Wholesale line rental is the rental price BT Openreach charges telephone service providers. So what is this exactly showing? So if you have a look at the important things, BT Retail, the price they are charging consumers has been steadily increasing every single year. But now the prices that they can provide these services at, the prices they charge telephone service providers, has been decreasing. Essentially, what does that show? What does that mean for BT's costs? If they can provide it for lower costs and they're consistently charging consumers higher prices, of course, this means firstly their costs are reducing. And how does that relate to? And of course, in the end, these higher profit margins. But the main thing is, which is this bit, which are the costs are reducing. How does that relate to our diagram? Of course, you can therefore say our cost curves, which are AC and MC, would be decreasing. And if you wanted to be more specific, you could of course therefore say this is as variable costs are decreasing, and of course if variable costs are decreasing, both MC and AC will shift downward. Let's get started with the cost revenue diagram. To pick up the marks for the diagram, of course you need to draw a cost revenue diagram, then you need to shift. You need to show some shifts to pick up the maximum marks of the diagram. But in this scenario, we do not need to show both the increase in revenue and decrease in costs. So I'm just going to pick one. I am going to pick the increase in revenue, as I think it's a bit easier. If you have enough time, if you can be bothered, you can show them both, but you do not need to, and you can get 12 out of 12 marks here by just shifting your just basically showing an increase in revenue, which would be your demand equals AR curve and your MR curve shifting out. So let's get on with drawing this. So let's draw our original curve. So D equals AR. Just of course, this is a simple monopoly diagram. Nothing different, no added details. So AC then we have our MC curve, and let's finish this off with the profit maximization point. Of course, where MC equals MR, then we go down from there to find our Q max, the quantity at where we are profit maximizing. We would go up from there to find what. This would now, we go up until we hit our D equals AR curve, then we go left, which will tell us the P max price. Then how do we find our profits? That's super normal profit. We go from Q max, we keep going up until we hit our AC curve, and this will now tell us our box of super normal profit. And now let's finish this off by showing how we would show an increase in revenue. Because of course, like I said, if there's what is the reason for a rise in BT's profit? They have merged, so therefore there's an increase in the firm's sales. They have more market share, therefore sales times price equals revenue. So therefore an increase in revenue. And like I said, whenever D equals AR shifts out, it will always cause MR to shift out also. So now let's shift out our D equals AR to now D equals AR1 and now MR. Just finishing off with our costs, of course. So how do you find your costs? You go from Q max 1, keep going up until you hit your AC curve, which will be just about there, and then we go left from there, which will give us now our costs, which are pretty similar to the last ones. But now this would therefore mean this is our new improved or bigger box of supernormal profit, which you would expect from increased revenue. So now I'm going to be very simple, state my point, of course include application. I'm probably going to go down the route of monopoly power since of course I think the extract mentions have 35% market share. So let's get on with that. So one likely reason for the rise in BT's profits is integration with EE, therefore meaning larger market share. So just for the application marks, I did a reference to the profits rose to 566 million, I think it's in the second quarter of 2017. But the way I'm going to continue on this chain of analysis, I'm going to quote the extract again. I think it mentioned that the market share has now risen with the integration with EE, has now risen to around 35%. If the market share is now 35%, what does that mean? It means they qualify as a legal monopoly. Thus, of course, if they qualify as a legal monopoly, it will therefore mean they have a degree of monopoly power. And of course, if you have 35% market share, it really does show in the market there may be a lack of substitutes. Therefore, it gives them a degree of inelastic demand. And of course, what is that going to lead to? It's going to lead to an increase in revenues for the firms. While they have that monopoly power, they can increase their prices, and consumers are almost forced to still buy from them since they have that degree of inelastic demand. Meaning that I'm going to quote meaning that demand equals AR shifts out to D equals AR1, and this will therefore lead to an increased box of supernormal profit. And of course, you could mention that that is one reason why BT's profits have now increased due to an increase in revenues. Just to put that in writing, 35% market share, thus, like I said, qualifies them as a legal monopoly. They therefore have that monopoly power, which gives them a degree of inelastic demand. So therefore, they can increase prices, as you can see on the diagram, of P max to P max 1, and it leads to an increased revenue from D equals AR, which is here, to D equals AR1. And that, of course, if you have an increase in revenue, of course, it means that you will have a larger box of supernormal profit, thus meaning that relating it back to the question, one likely reason for the rise in BT's profits is due to larger revenues. And now let's move on to the evaluation stage of this paragraph. Now, with regards to evaluation, the main point, of course, I'm going to mention is the blaring red flag, which is extract C, where essentially it's talking about how Ofcom had to step in and cause BT to reduce its prices, and of course with basically it's the word the evaluation point. However, in evaluation, this depends on the degree of regulation. As Ofcom have stepped in, they've decreased BT's prices. Thus, is going to really reduce the degree to which BT can therefore make supernormal profit, and could lead to actually a reduction in BT's profits instead of an increase in BT's profits. And of course, you can talk about other evaluation points, like something like time frame, as of course there's a massive bit of BT's revenue was older individuals, but now as the younger generation is getting older, they are more electronically literate, so they're better with technology, they're more technologically literate. Therefore, with the younger generation getting older now, they will not have the same degree of information gaps as the older generation, thus meaning that they will not be able to exploit the older generation as much, meaning that their profits could also reduce. But yeah, that's all you need for evaluation with this question. Like I said, with these cost revenue diagrams, if it explicitly mentions it, a lot of the marks in your question will be dedicated specifically to that diagram. So make sure you address it well. You, of course, don't make any mistakes with your diagram, and then make sure you include the diagram in your chains of analysis. Short chain of analysis needed, a few evaluation points, and that should be a concise and you could actually surplus this question where you could save a few minutes on this 12-mark question and then use that towards your 15-mark question. But yeah, let's now move on to that 15-mark question.